Okay guys, I've gone through all of your rough layouts and I have a few tips to kind of help you overall finish this up. One is on the cover, you've got to make sure that the Orange Coast College is part of the planetarium. The exhibits and showtimes are actually the name of this trifold. So this trifold is about the exhibits and showtimes for the Orange Coast College Planetarium. So make sure that it reads that way, because if you have Orange Coast College directly above this, then it reads like Orange Coast College exhibits and showtimes, but it's not that way. It's actually the planetarium is Orange Coast College. So check that and make sure that that reads that way. Also, I've never found it necessary to put more than one logo on a brochure. If a client insists, then you have to do what you have to do. But I would say if you say Orange Coast College on the cover, you can put the logo on the back. Now, if a client comes back and says, hey, we want the logo both places, then you got to do what you got to do. And you'll just find a way to make it as small as you can so it doesn't kind of ruin the whole look. Another thing is I noticed that a lot of you are using colors that are the black and the space colors and things like that. But you can also use colors from the actual planetarium. So these two images are perfect examples. And InDesign has a great tool for making color schemes directly from photos. So here, under the eyedropper tool is the color theme tool. And you can see that I had just tried that, so it's using the last image that I try. So if I click this, I get a color scheme based on this entire image, and I can add it to the swatches as it is. I can even choose a darker and more muted version or a brighter version, and I just click here, add theme to swatches. So now that color theme is here. I can also go into a specific area by hitting the Option or Alt key. So maybe all I want is the blues and the oranges, and then I can add that one. You can even use it if you wanted some blues and gray and black. You could use this specific area to match colors. And that would be useful for something like this or anywhere where you're showing flat colors. Instead of showing black, I can kind of tie it back in by making it blue, different colors of blue, like that one looks really good. And then when that's against the flap with this picture, they'll go together. In fact, I think I would go with the brighter color. Then when that flap is against these images, the blue will really tie in. Also, when you're putting your images in these rectangle frames, and you've got it, in this case, it's either going to the margin or it's going to the edge. We want to make sure that photos aren't just kind of sitting somewhere where they don't make sense. They need to lock to these margins or to the fold. So it sits here on the margin or it snaps to the fold. Same with these ones that bleed off. Either this goes off to the bleed, or maybe it stays at the bottom margin, but the side goes to the bleed, or all of it stays into the margins. You just need to be consistent with your images. Also, you can change how much of this image shows. For example, this one's Science on a Sphere. The sphere itself is way over there. So I'm going to take a look at my PPI. I have 332. So I'm going to see how much more I can get into this photo. I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm just dragging the image, not the image box. Now I'm at 244, so I can even go a little bit more and move this so that it's a little bit centered better in that square. Same with this pendulum. I've got 296 PPI, so I can take this a little larger like that. This one also, you can see there's a lot of this front area that's really dark and not very interesting to look at. So I can actually pull this in so that everything you're seeing is bright and it's the building. When you have type over an image, so in this particular case, we have type over this blue box, or even if we do it black, it makes it super easy to read. It's high contrast, so there's no problems. But when you start putting an image over it, that's when you get into problems. So let me show you an example. First of all, this image from my background, I could take that all the way across. I've got enough image there. And that one's not going to be a problem. I'll take that block box off because it's still pretty high contrast. When I look at this in preview mode, I could still read it pretty well. However, once I start putting an image that has a lot of darks and lights, it gets problematic. So this is a fantastic image from the James Hubble telescope, which is great, except for when we're getting into the middle of these. Let's get rid of that. You can see right in here the contrast just goes really low and it's very busy. It helps that this is a really bold type, but something you can do is this. You can take a solid color box. So I'm going to take this black box that we were using as our background earlier, and I'm going to come over here to opacity, and I'm going to put it on multiply. So you don't see anything right now because it's 100% opacity. But I can take the opacity of that black box down, and then you start to see the background again. So I can just push it. If I go 0, this is where it was. And you can see it's a little busy in that, behind that type. But if I go about there, 37%, it's just enough to help. And I can also do that if I wanted to do it on the back. See how it makes it a little darker under that type and helps a little? The other thing you can do is you can add a drop shadow. But what you want with a drop shadow on text is you want no one to know that there's actually a drop shadow on there. So let's go in really close. This obviously is very much a drop shadow. We don't want that. You can see it actually mirrors the type and interferes with it. So if we take the distance way down, we're at 0.0625. Now if I take the distance down anymore, and the blur down anymore, it just disappears. But you can actually put in your own number. So instead of 0.06, I'm going to put 0.03 on both of those. Then it gets pretty subtle. And I can even take the opacity on it down just a little bit. So now there's a drop shadow there. There's no drop shadow. There's a drop shadow, but you don't see it. You don't look at it and go, oh, wow, look at that drop shadow. And you can kind of keep futzing with that until you get it just the way you like. So we could go even 2 on that, so it's more subtle. Now when it comes to widows and orphans, this is justified text, but I've seen a lot of text that's hanging off like this. And especially something like this where the word experience breaks. You don't want that hanging off the edge like that. With justified text, you can go in here and try to take the, there it goes, tracking. I took it to -5 and it absorbed it. No problem. You can go about -10 until it's just too tight on body copy. Also, your subheads, on some of you, your subheads were inconsistent. So this subhead is actually in here as all caps. So everything I applied my subhead to is going to be all caps, and that'll keep it consistent. If you don't have that, then you'll have, these are upper and lower case, and you might have some that you've made into all caps and some that you haven't. So make sure you put the case in the style sheet. That way you can control it and it'll be consistent. And avoid small cap. Small caps is this abomination that capitalizes the word, but then capitalizes the first letter even bigger. And you want to avoid that at all costs. It distorts the type. Now let's say that you wanted to put text around an image. If you wanted to take an image and bump it across right into this block of copy, to control how the text goes around this is actually happens from the image itself. That's where you control the wraparound. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit wrap around bounding box on this top control bar. And remember, I get here by having Essentials Classic as my workspace. Now that I've got it wrapping, it's still setting the text wrap right on the edge of this image, which you don't want. And you can control that just 2 ways. Either hold the Option key and click on this. You can make them all the same by connecting them this way. And you can put just a little bit of wrap all around there. 0.125 is plenty. The other thing you want to keep track of as far as spacing is when you have images. So if this image were up here, there's no measuring device for this. You just kind of have to manually do it. The way I do it is I'll make a little box. Now this little box is the cap height of the type to the bottom edge of the image. So let's see if this is the same. Nope. So I'm just going to move this image down until it hits right there on the box. Okay, so make sure the spacing around the images and the text. Within the text, you can do it in the style sheet, so that's no problem. But above the text, you want to make sure that that's consistent. Okay, and hopefully that should help you fix any issues you're having, and I'm looking forward to seeing your final brochure.